at least now, there has never been more focus on this issue and more topic, more effort, more resources, both in terms of time and money devoted to trying to create greater diversity at all levels of organizations. And that was something that really came out of our study, was that 98% of the companies we surveyed said they specifically are engaging in diversity hiring initiatives this year.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization Show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy shift going on in the world of business, technology, and HR. Here's your host, Ira Wolf, and co-host, Joyce Joya.
Well, happy Women's History Month. Happy International Women's Day. Belated
right.
Day.
Belatedly.
Happy Employee Appreciation Day. We're a couple of days late for that. But we've got a great show. Welcome back to Geeks Geezers and Googlization. And thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. Today, we've got Romy Newman from FairyGodBoss. Will be a great conversation.
I love that name.
Yeah.
I just love that name, Ira.
And the timing.
I really do.
Yeah, the timing just couldn't be, I can't say better, more appropriate, because we should have been talking about this and fixing this for a long time. But the core part will be the core part of our conversation today, and we have a second guest as well. We'll be talking about employee appreciation, gender diversity, fairness, women in the workplace, especially for people of color. There's a whole, we've been talking about this for a while, but especially for Women's History Month and International Women's Day. What a more appropriate topic. And it seems to be the theme. I mean, last week we had Marjorie on the show. We were talking about investing in diversity. You know, her whole portfolio is half minorities, half women. Unbelievable. And then next week we've got Bev K. We're going to be talking about engagement. With that, developing that engagement culture. So it wasn't planned. I wish I could say I had that foresight to think about who was going to be talking about it. And then the second guest today is Brian Hershey from a company called Gloat. And they just released a survey about undervalued employees. And we'll give you some stats, about that as well. So we're going to have a really, really nice conversation. Before I bring Romy on, there are a couple things. One is want everybody to remember 2 weeks today, March 24th, doing our AQ Summit, Adaptability Summit. In fact, just minutes before the show, I went up and picked up a new domain, and it's courage with a Q, as in quotient, courage with a Q, Ourage, to change, courage to change. And one of the things that we're struggling with, not only changing to the speed with digital transformation, post-pandemic world, exponential change, VUCA, whatever we want to talk about. We talk about grit, resilience, mindset, all those things. But without the courage to take that first step, nothing happens. Nothing changes. And we need to help build confidence. So I've been talking about that. And then the light bulb went on this morning about what about courage to change. That domain was taken. Nobody has the site, but the domain was taken. But I went up and talked about, because we talk so much about adaptability quotient. So you can either do the AQ with a Q, courage to change, or just courage to change. .com, and you'll come up to the webinar. It's free. It'll be for an hour and 15 minutes. I have great speakers. Heidi Spierge, Chief Strategy Officer. Now she has a new title, Chief Strategy and Growth Officer at Cornerstone On Demand. She will be joining us. Ross Thornley from AQAI will be joining. And Mary Faulkner from a company called IAHR. They do a lot of work with this. Heard her partner speak last week, and it was just, as I was listening, it was like they were either reading my mind or I was reading theirs. So we have three great thought leaders on it, and hopefully you'll be able to join us. And there is one SHRM credit for anybody who's interested. Hopefully that's not the only reason you come, but we do have that, and you'll get some credit there. Joyce, you've had a typically busy week, and you're on mute, by the way. Your mute button's on for some.
Yes, how's that?
That is good. Gotcha.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No worries. So at this, I don't know if there's a comment before, but I want to bring on Romy. Otherwise, we'll
Yes,
just
let's
lead into her. Okay.
Well,
So
yeah, I just wanted to say that it's just before the Adaptability Summit is just before our podcast on the 24th,
yes,
right?
yeah. So you blocked out a couple hours that day. You can, and you'll be able to get both on a replay if you can't make it. But March 24th, 11 a.m. Will be the panel, the AQ Summit. And then on that, and then at 1 p.m., as we always are, Geeks Geezers and Googlization. So it'll be a good conversation. Right now, we're going to bring on our first guest, which is Romy Newman. She is a co-founder. Hey, Romy.
Hello.
Co-founder of FairyGodBoss.
FairyGodBoss.
Say it three times fast.
Yeah.
Right.
So, we'll find out a little bit more about that. But as the three of us were just talking very briefly before the show, you had just released a State of Diversity Recruiting in 2021. Some incredible information there. The one statistic that just blew me away, and I thank you for bringing it to our attention, but it just blew me away. The fact that not how many women left the workforce or some of the challenges there, but if there's only one female candidate, including on a final slate, there's statistically a 0 chance that she will be hired.
That's right.
So if you have,
just to give credit where credit's due, that is not from our study. That's actually out of a Harvard Business Review article. But yes, that is
even better, independent,
yes,
right?
Independently verified.
Yeah, I mean, that just blows me away. I mean, so you're talking about you narrow down the field to 4 people, you get the one female candidate, and 0 chance. I mean, it's almost like a token. Hey, we did what we.
And it's even worse for other historically underrepresented minorities.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And it is 2020. I just want to check. It is 2021, right?
Still supposed to be.
Yeah. So, and on top of that, just on a broader sense, we have, a lot of news. Georgia is trying to institute the voter suppression laws. 43 states are trying to suppress voters. So it's not only in the workplace. I mean, we have a lot of challenges ahead. So we need to put it into perspective. So there's a lot of people that are trying to hold people back for whatever reason. And then this morning, this Bloomberg report comes out and looks at the 100 largest corporations that only 37 release their diversity data. Out of those 37, there's only one, which is, I'll give credit to them, McDonald's, that has both female people of color, which includes Hispanic and Black or brown, in their top executive suites. Crazy. I mean, this is just nuts.
We have so much progress to make.
Oh.
But Ira and Joyce, I am actually a perennial optimist.
We need to be.
Yeah. And so what
do.
I will say, and what we're seeing is, at least now, there has never been more focus on this issue and more topic, more effort, more resources, both in terms of time and money, devoted to trying to create greater diversity at all levels of organizations. So, and that was something that really came out of our study, was that 98% of the companies we surveyed said they specifically are engaging in diversity hiring initiatives this year, which is, unfortunately, it's not a tracking survey, but I can assure you that number has increased. And so the issue is now we've got this desire, we've got the goal. How do we do it? And that's where I think that the next piece has to come.
Yeah, and with that, by the way, is I think it was 98% said that they had this on their agenda, but there was only 26% that actually had a requirement to have a diversity slate.
That's right. And then among the ones that had the slate, some of their requirement was to have only one diverse candidate on the slate, which we know specifically doesn't produce any results.
Right.
Yeah.
But at least they met that criteria. Sorry, Joyce, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that the slate of candidates really does make a difference. If you don't have multiple diverse candidates to choose from, then chances are it's just not going to work. And I'm hoping that because for so long, so many employees said, "Oh, they're just giving lip service to it." I'm sure that you've heard that, Romy.
Certainly, yes.
And I'm seeing now that more companies are really putting their money where their mouth is, and it's not enough, but it's a lot more than we had before.
I think that's right. And Ira, you're right to point to this Bloomberg study. I always go back to the opening chapter of Lean In, which really in many ways ignited the diversity effort for women in the 2010s. Her opening chapter is about, Sheryl Sandberg's opening chapter is about how when she was pregnant working at Google, and she had to walk so far from the parking lot, and she was luckily a member of the executive team. So she said, why don't we have maternity parking, right? And until there was a woman or somebody who'd had that experience in the executive suite, change doesn't happen, right? So we have got to get representation into the executive levels. That is what's going to make all the difference.
Yeah, and again, it's having that voice at the top, but and it's going to have the people who are in power. So if you have so many companies that don't have people of color in there, or you don't have people who are pregnant, then nobody's going to bring that up. And it takes people like myself, a white male, who is none of the above, not a female, not a person of color, nor can I get pregnant. Sometimes I feel that way, but ultimately it's us. I know I know Torrin Ellis. I mean, I love Torrin, and he's not afraid to pull punches. And it's like, listen, and when I interviewed them, or I've interviewed him a few times, it's like, listen, I'm an old white guy. I mean, I try. What can I do?
Right.
And go try harder.
Right.
Right. It's try harder. It's everybody's susceptible to it, and we're you can't be afraid to make mistakes, which goes back to how I opened when we talk about adaptability. Adaptability is not just about change, but having the courage to change the environment, to change people's minds, to change so we can learn how to have grit and resilience and growth mindset and all this other stuff everybody throws around, including me. But ultimately, what those things need to do is provide people the courage in order to do that. And as you're doing, is certainly bringing awareness, to the situation. Yep.
And I will say also, kind of going back to, since this is Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, so we're talking about the diversity slate. And really, what I've come to uncover, it seems so logical to me that everyone have diverse slates, right? But actually, the infrastructure you need to be able to tee up diverse slates is significant. You need to be able to track diversity demographics of the candidates, which they have to volunteer. You need to track them in a way that blinds the hiring manager, right? And you need to be able to hold that data in the aggregate. And what I'm finding is the reality is many companies just don't have the infrastructure. In many cases, they may not know the demographic breakdown of their existing employees. I mean, so companies are not releasing their demographics. They may not know their demographics, right? So there's a lot, but we now fortunately have all kind of come together around the what, right? And we want more diversity, but there's a lot of technology and data development that will need to happen in order to support it.
No, you're absolutely correct. So before we get too far down the road, I know we wanted, this was a question from Joyce, so you can ask it. Joyce, was your number the top question you had? So
how did you come up with FairyGodBoss?
Yes, if I had a nickel for every time I was asked that.
I really do.
So I'm not sure if you know this, but the story of how FairyGodBoss came to be is that my co-founder, Georgine, and I were both executives at a big publishing company. And hello, Torrin. I'm so glad to know you're out there. So Georgine and I were both executives at this big publishing company, and Georgine got caught up in a big management shakeup and she lost her job. It wasn't anything she did. When she lost her job, she was 2 months pregnant. So now she had to go find a job knowing that when she interviewed, she would be visibly pregnant. And so she took to the internet. She's a very fastidious person, and she wanted to be able to do research about what it was like to work at all these different companies as a woman and as a working mother. She wanted to hear from other women who worked there. Did they feel supported? Did they feel like they had a seat at the table? Did they feel like they were treated equally and paid equally? Did they feel like they could leave at 5:30 to go home to their kids without, this is New York City, people stay at work till 8. And mostly she wanted to know what the maternity leave policy was. So she went to all of the resources that exist for job seekers, like LinkedIn and Glassdoor and Indeed, and none of them had these answers. None of them answered her specific set of questions as a job seeker. So she said, I'm going to create that platform. And she tapped me on the shoulder to come be her co-founder. And we needed a name. So we knew that from a mission perspective, we wanted a place that women could come together to lift each other up around career. We hadn't found that for each other. And we had both been through kind of rising up through the corporate ladder, and it can be isolating. We wanted a place that women could bring their questions, their concerns, their challenges, and their achievements and share it with a community. And also, importantly, share it in an anonymous forum, because we knew that a lot of these topics were things that it's hard to put your name next to. So that's a long answer to your question, but in short, we wanted a name that would connote that everyone who was on our platform was somebody who was helping women advance in the workplace simply by sharing information, by sharing a high five, by sharing a piece of data. And so we wanted a name that connote that everyone on the community is somebody helping each other and lifting each other up. And we both have small kids, so fairy godmothers, fairy godbosses were top of mind, and here we are.
Love it. I just love it. And go ahead. No, you go ahead.
So Romy, so again, you're creating this safe place for have these conversations. You're creating a community to support. You're helping increase the self-awareness. What are some of the steps that you're doing to actually, I don't want to say force the change, because that means it's forcing it on there, but to inspire other people to make this change? Because in having FairyGodBoss, and it's a community for women to be able to support that, what happens to all of us, all the older white guys? Like how can we support in that, other than it becomes the water cooler talk?
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, which is a topic we talk about a lot, is how to enlist men as allies. And I'm really passionate about it. And I especially have to tell you that I owe my career to a few different men who really helped lift me up. And so I think one of the things we coach on for our users is how to enlist help. But I think certainly understanding and being attuned to the idea that women may not have the same voice, or other underrepresented minorities may not have the same voice. So creating room for their voice to be heard, or checking in, opening the lines of communication is always helpful. And then also offering opportunities. I mean, I will say I had somebody who helped develop me in my career, and I owe so much to him. I reported to him for 5 years at the Wall Street Journal. And when he was brought in before the board to make presentations that I worked behind the scenes to develop, he brought me in and he gave me the floor, right? And instead of taking credit, he gave me the credit. And that type of gift has made all the difference for me. So I think, that's a definite place to start. And look, you're doing it right now, Ira. So thank you.
I joined your platform, Romy.
I'm so glad, Joyce.
And I was wondering, I think it's wonderful, the services that you're providing, but you must have a way to make money as well.
Yes. So we are free to our users. That's really important to us. We don't need to be one more thing that somebody needs to pay for. And the way that we make money is by working with corporations. One of the things I'm most proud of is the caliber of companies that we work with. Among our customers are Google and Facebook and Goldman Sachs and Bank of America and many, many others. And LinkedIn is even one of our customers. So we help them raise their profile among our audience of nearly 10 million women, telling our audience the story about answering all those questions that Georgine had as a job seeker. Why is this company a place that women thrive? What would the opportunities here be like for a woman? What is this company doing to invest, to make progress in diversity? Because I think the reality is, we know, that Bloomberg report makes it clear we have such a long way to go, right? So the question that I think job seekers are asking today, and not just women and not just historically underrepresented minorities, but is how is this company standing up to commit toward more progress, toward more diversity? And actually we got that from a study that we fielded, that women were 1.5 times more likely to apply to a company based on the stance it has publicly taken toward diversity, and Black women are twice as likely.
Well, that's really interesting, really fascinating. So I have a question for you personally. What was your favorite job other than what you're doing now? What was your favorite job and why?
So I have had 2 amazing jobs before this that are sort of bookends in my career. One was right out of college. I worked at Estee Lauder in marketing for 6 years, and I loved it. I loved working on the products. There's just nothing like the adrenaline of actually putting together a product and then seeing it come off a manufacturing line. It is just thrilling. And then in a store, so thrilling. It feels so cool. And then later on, I did work at the Wall Street Journal for 7 years, and just the smartest people, the nicest people. And, you think about purpose, but I did have a really strong sense of the notion that I sold advertising. I was in the advertising department, but the money I brought into that institution helped further democracy in this country. And I know that. I feel really confident about that. And that kind of purpose behind my work meant everything. But it was a great place to go to work every day also.
I understand what you mean about purpose. That makes a tremendous difference. Go ahead.
Romy, you mentioned before about the power of having a mentor within the organization.
And a sponsor, yes.
And a sponsor. So within companies that aren't well represented in the management leadership roles with women or people of color or both, how does that happen? I mean, is that, again, it takes the old, it could be a white woman, but it is, since the majority happen to be white men, it is to be able to, one is step out and identify the women to mentor, and especially getting into people of color, because it can't happen. I mean, there's no way to have a one-to-one relationship when the pyramid's inversed.
That's right. And I've lived it. I mean, I was a senior level woman at the Wall Street Journal, the advertising team, and I was the only senior level woman, and there were 200 entry level women. So I would have loved to have mentored all of them, but it just wasn't possible, right? But that said, I do think that identifying high potential employees and giving them opportunities for their voice to be heard, giving them stretch assignments. Again, my career was made on stretch assignments, and inviting them into the room, even if they are not, so inviting them into the executive committee to give a presentation, even if maybe they're not yet on the executive committee. These are different ways that you can create representation and help plan for a more diverse future.
Right. Which, going back to the high potentials, that makes sense. It's rational. It's like, let's look at the people who are ambitious enough that we can bring up the fastest to fix this. I was listening to something else this morning, though, and they were talking about the dangers of high potential, because there's bias even in that. I mean, who's identified as a high potential? So you go back to, it doesn't have to be an external candidate being selected. It could be an internal candidate selected. So again, you have that internal slate and say, listen, we have 1 out of 4, a person of color and a woman, 1 out of 4 of these final candidates to be promoted into manager slot. Where's the attraction? How much effort goes into that person? So the bias just goes, throughout, unfortunately.
Yeah, the slate has to hold true for internal movement as well, and then also on the committee, the hiring committee, right?
Yeah, what's that look like?
Right.
Right.
3 white men sitting across the table, right?
Self-perpetuating, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot. What surprised you most about this? As I said, I'll pull out my one statistic. What surprised you the most out of this report that you just released?
I think to revisit what I said earlier, it's about how limited the measurement is. So you've got you've got 98% of companies saying they want to hire more diverse applicants, but they only 55% can even measure the demographics of their hires. So how, that is a systems issue, right? I think there's a lot of investment that's going to have to happen to bridge that gap.
Well, I guess the good news is that, at least for publicly traded companies, that the SEC is now putting the requirement in that they have to, if they say people are their most important assets, let's prove it. You know, what was your investment? What does that look like? And you know, just as the Bloomberg study indicated, there's going to be a lot more disclosure. And to give them credit, at least last year there was only 14 companies that released the data to them out of 100. This year there was 27. So I think I know it was 37 this year. I think there was 24 or 25 additional ones this year. So at least we're moving, as you said, in the right direction.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder something. You know that a lot of publicly held companies are releasing their stats on employee turnover.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the organizations that have the lowest employee turnover are the ones that tend to be most successful moving into the future. I wonder if they will begin, once they begin to make some progress in this regard, Romy, I wonder if they will begin to release those statistics so that people understand that this is an indicator also of success and profit as we move into the future, to have
Absolutely.
more diversity in the higher ranks.
No question. I think more and more stakeholders are going to require it, whether it's the NASDAQ that won't take companies public unless they have diversity representation, whether it's Goldman Sachs that won't do it, BlackRock, or whether it's even employees or customers. The different stakeholders that will be holding companies' feet to the fire is growing and growing. Great news. Great news.
Romy, so we just have a few minutes here left. It goes incredibly fast.
It sure does.
What's next for FairyGodBoss? What's next on your agenda?
Yeah, world domination. I think our vision is there's 73 million working women in America. We've got about 10 using our platform, and so would love to grow that number and grow beyond the U.S., grow internationally, which is on our radar for 2022.
And for anybody who wants to get in contact, obviously one way is the website's scrolling across the bottom, FairyGodBoss. I believe there's a link up there to download the report, correct?
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If not, how can they reach out to you? And by the way, just to kind of heads up, we've got Georgine coming. I think she just scheduled literally like minutes before we were on the air today. I think the end of May. So we'll be able to check some of that progress out.
My alter ego, yes.
Yeah, for sure. How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, great. You can find me on FairyGodBoss and connect with me there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I would love to connect with you.
Perfect. Any final comments, words of
yes.
wisdom you can leave us?
Here's my burning platform. According to the World Economic Forum, we are over 250 years from achieving economic gender equality, economic parity among genders in the workplace. And that is too long. That is punishingly long. I have a daughter who's 7, and I would love to know what it would take for her to see it in her lifetime.
Well, we're happy to be on the journey with you. We're thrilled to be on the journey with you. And citing World Economic Forum, we're also, again, on the adaptability side, giving people courage to change. 375 million people are at risk for being left behind. Yeah. And so we're on a similar pathway. Mm-hmm. And they're probably joined, they're conjoined twins.
That's for sure.
So we will be, I know we will be with you all along that route. Thank you, Romy. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for being part of today's show. And we're thrilled to share the message.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.
It was a blast. Thanks, Romy. Stay safe. Wow. again, it's going faster and faster. It gets dizzying. So really appreciate it. And again, we've got we're going to continue this discussion, but we're going to continue with Brian Hershey after the break. And he's from Gloat, and they just released a survey, which again talks about all people. The companies are just doing a lousy job of making people valued at work, which comes down to it. But they particularly, they're not doing a very good job with people of color and women. So we're going to be back with that. Thank you for listening to Geeks Geezers Googlization. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you're not part of it, please go up to googlizationnation.com. It's free. You'll get updates each week about the webinars, about podcasts, about guests, and other special offers that we have. We're going to take a really quick break. We're going to hear from our two sponsors, Ingomo, and then we will hear from Success Performance Solutions. And then we will be back with Brian Hershey and from Gloat.
Imagine growing great employees and advancing emerging leaders with one small monthly investment. With the Ingomu app, you can support your employees in career and personal development and health and wellness without spending a lot of effort to schedule and hold numerous training sessions. With the efficient app, your employees will have access to dozens of coaches in groups and one-on-ones for whatever topic they need or want to work on anytime, anywhere. Picture the positive impact on your team by having access to over 80 coaches. Learn more at ingomu.com today.
For many people, the bridge to the new normal is too far, too difficult, too scary. Waiting to get back to normal becomes a way of life, filled with fear and despair. But wait, why are those people who dare to travel to the new normal celebrating? Opportunity and growth? How can you get a piece of the action? The bridge between the past and the future, the status quo and the new normal, is adaptability. You have a choice. Which side of the future do you want to land on? Will it be coping and surviving or growing and thriving? Adaptability quotient is the new competitive edge.
Hey, welcome back, everyone, to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, and thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. We had a great first segment with Romy Newman from FairyGodBoss talking about how much road we have ahead to close that gender diversity, just any diversity gaps, especially for opportunity. Again, talking that it's going to take 250 years to have pay equity. Gender equity, it's just crazy since we, again, we've got, we don't even have 250 years as a country. So it's going to take the United States being a democratic, having a democracy and have 500 years to get parity. That's pretty insane. But we're going to continue this conversation with Brian Hershey. Brian is the head of enterprise at Gloat. And we're going to learn a little bit more about what Gloat is, and you can also learn more at gloat.com. But they just released a survey too. Let's see, I'm going to read it here. I got this from their PR company, and it certainly brought my attention to it. But a third of American workers feel undervalued at work.
Yeah, 34%, as I recall, right?
Yeah, nearly half, 46% of Black employees feel underutilized, and 38% of Latinx employees feel the same. So again,
and the statistic that really blew me away was that 64% are looking for another job.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to, hopefully Brian is still with us. I know he's been waiting. There he is. Hey, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Joyce.
Good to see you again. We're making a habit of this, right? 2 days in a row.
Good to see you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on today.
Yeah. So tell us, one is talk, what Gloat is. Obviously, we know what gloating is. So, talk about Gloat, and then we can dive into the survey that you had.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start, and it'll set up hopefully a little bit of sort of the why behind why we went out and did this survey. But Gloat, so what we did is we really pioneered a new HR technology platform and really a new paradigm for how large companies can both utilize their talent and their workforce, and also help enable their people to have more fulfilling careers. And that innovation is what we call the talent marketplace. And what that is a two-sided marketplace inside of a company where employees can go to find interesting full-time roles. So, perhaps their next kind of full-time home in the business, in their career, but also, projects and internal gig work, things that can take them outside of sort of the box where they spend, most of their time, in the company, and really begin to stretch and develop and grow and always have those experiences for growth at their fingertips. And other opportunities as well for their growth and development. We think about volunteering opportunities, job shadowing opportunities, learning experiences, and others. And then on the other side of this marketplace, of course, you have managers, HR, leadership, who really are using this talent marketplace as a way to really handpick talent at the skill level, bring it to where it's needed in the business faster than ever before, and also help employees, really navigate their careers and find meaningful directions for themselves that align with their interests and aspirations inside of the company. So it's really tremendous to see one, the impact we're having helping organizations, some of the largest in the world, among them Unilever and Schneider Electric, Standard Chartered Bank, Walmart, and others. Helping them become more agile, more flexible. And we've seen, them using their talent marketplaces really to navigate the pandemic and the impact that that's had on their businesses. But I think, even more, amazing is the impact that it's having on individuals who can use the talent marketplace to always find new opportunities and always have access to new opportunities, which is an interesting topic we can definitely double click on off the back of the survey data.
So
that's about what we do.
So it's functioning as a community. I mean, is it a job board? You're posting and listing jobs for these companies as well?
So it's one step further. We found that the problem with the job board is that you can post thousands of jobs or openings there. Very quickly gets pretty messy, and it also becomes difficult for an employee to understand one, even where to access that job board, to understand which roles are actually relevant and applicable to them, and really just to navigate that whole process. I mean, we actually approach this with an understanding that most employees actually don't know exactly what they're looking for next. It might not even be a full-time role, right? It could be that they're looking for an experience, an opportunity, a new skill set. And it gets more granular than that. And so what we're doing is, we're looking at, what skills does this, employee have? What does their sort of past and present look like? But also, what are their dreams? What are their forward-looking aspirations for where they want to take their career? And how do we use that, marry that with, the objectives of the business and, connect that bridge, which is really, purpose for the individual and purpose for the organization. And that's where our platform is using AI to do that kind of matching at scale.
So you have the employees put in their abilities and talents and all that, and then the system using AI figures out where they would fit best in the positions that become available. Is that accurate?
That's a good description. We do make that process really automated, so an employee can upload a LinkedIn profile or even their resume. We can sort of extract meaning in terms of skills and capabilities using NLP and other AI techniques, and then we are able to match them based on multiple criteria. So we're not just looking who's sort of the perfect fit in terms of skills, right, or capabilities, but we want to understand who actually also has potentially the interest, or who has maybe some of the skills, but we could move this person into that opportunity because it'll be a great venue to develop that person. And then it ties into this concept of employee development, employee retention, employee satisfaction, engagement. We really help close the loop there.
And the thing that I like the best about earlier is that we know that 49%, according to ClickSuasion's recent survey, 49% of employees have a side gig, some sort of side thing that allows them to make money. So what you are doing, which I just love, is to automate their access to the companies generating those side gigs, which, by the way, is something else that Michael Barbera has talked about. Incidentally, we're having Michael Barbera as our guest sometime in the future. Can't tell you exactly when, but he'll be here. But this whole idea of a side gig and helping employees have access to it, I think is just a phenomenal idea. So thank you very much for what you're doing.
And Brian, I mean, I love what I'm actually doing for HR, for BLR, HR Now. Tech Week is Tech. HR Tech Week is next week. And I'm doing their keynote. And, we're talking about how you can use technology for the greater good. Not just to automate your processes, not to how can we make recruiting easier or employee engagement or chat. We have all these new environments, but how can we use it for the greater good? How can we actually help people by doing that? So I second Joyce's motion and thank you for that. Let's talk about your survey before we run out of time here, because it'll go fast.
Sure.
And I shared a few of the information. Well, just like we were talking about with Romy Newman earlier, we had a long way to go. And when you have approximately half the workforce feels underutilized, undervalued, it's there's a lot of telling. So those were some of the stats. Tell us a little bit more about the survey and where you hope to go with it.
Absolutely. So we kicked off this survey. We call it the Why We Work survey. You can find the full survey on our website, gloat.com/why-we-work, or just Google us and you'll find it. And the purpose behind this survey was an interesting one. And we discovered a lot of things we didn't know. And then we sort of, discovered some things we already did know, but now we have some great, data behind it. And, we always kind of understood almost intuitively that, the most important driver for the individual when they're thinking about, their career choices and also the motivation behind, why they work is that, salary is a relatively small part of that. It's there. It's certainly an important part of that and something we should pay attention to. But there are really these other components that are more emotional and actually what our survey showed actually more relevant to a lot of people, which is access to opportunity, trying new things, access to new challenge, and really the ability to sort of step outside of their day to day and kind of follow what's new and interesting. People want growth. If you really want to boil it down, and so in this survey we really wanted to understand what are those other factors in the workplace that contribute to people's decisions about whether they leave an employer, whether they decide to stay with an employer, and so on. So one of the really interesting points that we got from this, and it was one of the more surprising, was that a third of American workers are feeling undervalued at work. And part of that is tied to the fact that they felt that organizations don't have enough visibility into what their skills and capabilities are, and then aren't effectively, really giving them opportunities to, put those skills and capabilities to work. We also found, not unsurprising again, unfortunately, when we double clicked on that 34%, which was the general number, and we looked at, different segments of the workforce, that number actually skewed much higher in certain segments. So among Black employees, that number was 46% who felt underutilized. Amongst Latinx, it was 38%. And then when we looked at gender split, actually really interesting, 43% of women felt underutilized, while only 24% of men feel underutilized. So, more than almost twice as many women respondents were saying that they were feeling underutilized at work. And all of these, variances from that base level, 34% are really significant, which means, as you said, Ira, there's a lot of work to be done, for sure.
Right. Brian, I was fascinated to see the numbers on dissatisfaction with work and intention to leave. I believe it was the way it was. And we've seen that for a long time, that a lot of employees have been dissatisfied, and yet they've stayed. They've stayed because they're scared. they stayed because of COVID. They were afraid they couldn't get another job, I guess. And just like I think there's a tremendous pent-up demand in terms of travel and going to restaurants and all those things that we haven't been able to do. There may be, HR professionals, please take note, a pent-up demand in terms of people leaving one job and going to another. Do you agree with that?
I do, absolutely. And we have seen that in the data as well with a number of our customers, where it almost appears like they've had a really good year. Retention has actually gone up, or turnover has come down. And I think a lot of, people looking at the space are saying, look, when do things, maybe return to some level of normalcy? I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but there is sort of, likely to be that pent up demand where people are looking for new jobs. And we got that data in our survey as well. I mean, we found that 64% of employees plan to leave their jobs. So that's a pretty high, these are people who are open to opportunity. Given the opportunity, they will potentially leave. It's a very high number, and large organizations, large enterprises tend to struggle with this. And that's where, we see part of the solution is making that opportunity available to employees. And it's so important. And some of the companies you work with, they speak to employees who leave, in their exit interviews. And it's not about, they didn't like their manager, or, it's not necessarily about their pay. It's usually about, their visibility into their career growth and their access to opportunities.
Yeah, Brian, it's amazing. And we're just about out of time here, so I want to give a chance to kind of wrap up quick. But over the weekend, went to our diner, and it's walking distance from our house, but go down there, we pick up breakfast. We still haven't done the dine-in thing there. But we went down and picked up breakfast. As we usually do, and there's a sign on the door. They're cutting back hours because they can't find people. The return to normalcy that everybody's looking for, that we're just going to go back to the way it was. We've been talking about a long time. I've been talking about it a long time, is be careful what you wish for, because when we go back, we're still going to have that shortage of skilled labor, and even more so than we ever did before. So here is a 24-hour diner that's cutting back hours because they can't find enough people to staff it. And then I went to get my coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, which is just a few blocks away, and they were closed because they didn't have enough people. They don't have enough people to work the second shift, and they didn't have enough people on the weekend to work. So here are two thriving businesses that you normally couldn't get into are already having to shut down because they can't find people. So it's just starting.
That's right. And you know what, that dynamic, I think, scales from the local diner up to, the Fortune 500. And talent is the most precious asset a business has. And businesses need to be taking, those steps and thinking ahead to make sure that they, keep the talent that they already have. That's a good place to start.
Ryan, we're barely getting warmed up here, so hopefully we're going to keep tabs on you. Hopefully you'll come back
right.
for
sure.
Continue this conversation, because you're doing a lot of great things. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Me personally, LinkedIn, Gloat. Visit our website. You can find lots of information there. But yeah, feel free to reach out, and we'd love to continue the conversation.
Hey, thanks very much, Brian. Thanks for all you do.
You, Brian.
Take care.
Thank you both.
Wow, that was I'm exhausted. I'm tired. We got great people. I'm liking the new format with other people. Again, it really enriches that conversation. Next week, we have, as I said, we have Bev Kay. She's got a new book, her 6th edition version of it, Leave 'Em or Lose 'Em, and
Love 'em or lose 'em.
Lose 'em, yeah, love 'em or lose 'em. So we're excited to have her. We'll continue this conversation because it all fits in the same vein. And then I've got, there's a couple people we're trying to juggle the schedules around, get them scheduled in the next few weeks as well. Again, I want to thank everybody. Joy, thank you for being hosting with me.
Thank you.
Lots at the table, and you're picking up where I'm leaving off, and gives me a chance to check on a couple things. Thank you for listening to Geeks Geezers and Googlization. If you're not part of Googlization Nation yet, please do so. Go to Googlizationnation.com. It's free. You'll get subscriptions, a free update each week that I send out with the podcast, webinars, other events. And don't forget about the webinar coming up 2 weeks today, March 24th. at 11 a.m. Eastern time, right before the podcast, where we're going to be talking about how can you help your employees not only adapt, but broader sense than that, how do you help them get the courage to change? Because there's a lot we need to change, all the way from diversity, inclusion to just innovating, growing, thriving, all of that. Thank you again, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Until next week, don't let the shift hit your plans.